Here's what artists don't want to admit. AI isn't replacing great art. It's replacing commercial illustration, stock photography, content mill articles, formulaic fiction, the stuff that was never really art in the first place. These are commodity products masquerading as creativity, and commodities get automated. And I practice what I preach here. I use AI to create thumbnails for my podcast episodes. That's commodity visual content that needs to be produced quickly and efficiently. But when I needed a new logo for my brand, I hired a human designer through Fiverr. Because a logo isn't just decoration, it's strategic brand identity that requires understanding context, audience, and long-term vision. That distinction between commodity creative work and genuine artistic value is at the heart of today's discussion.
It's not just about the police anymore. It's about the FBI. Criminal! You're all fucking criminals! You wear that fucking badge! You're the
Analog timepiece, skywise, sing to the ticker inside. Move to the rhythm on the moon and tide. Radio children. Serious things
You are listening to Free Talkcast, where we talk about news and current events from a perspective of peace, love, and liberty. I'm your host, Aria, and let's get right into things. So welcome back, and thank you for listening. Today I want to tackle one of the most contentious debates in the creative world right now: generative artificial intelligence and the accusation that it's stealing from artists and writers. Now, before anyone gets their brushes in a twist, let me be clear about something. I'm not here to dismiss the legitimate concerns that artists have about their economic situations. But I do think that we need to have an honest conversation about creativity, inspiration, and the rather inflated sense of originality that humans seem to have developed. The core argument that I keep hearing is that AI is fundamentally different from human creativity because it steals from existing work. But here's the thing: that criticism reveals more about human ego than it does artificial intelligence, because every single artist, writer, musician, and creative person throughout history has built their work on the foundation of what came before them. So let's start with visual art. When I took art classes in high school, and I'm sure many of you had similar experiences, what did they teach us? They told us to study the masters, copy their techniques, learn from Van Gogh's learn from Van Gogh's brushstrokes, Picasso's use of form, Da Vinci's understanding of anatomy. We were literally instructed to absorb and replicate elements from other artists' work. That wasn't called stealing, it was called learning. It was called developing your craft. But somehow, when an AI does exactly the same thing, studies existing artwork to understand patterns, styles, and techniques, suddenly it's theft? That's a fascinating double standard. Every artist pulls styles and elements from pieces. God damn it. Every artist pulls styles and elements and pieces from other artists. It's not just acceptable, it's fundamental to how creativity works. Jackson Pollock didn't emerge from a creative vacuum. His drip paintings were built on abstract expressionism, which built on even earlier movements, which built on the techniques and innovations of countless artists before them. The difference is that humans have convinced themselves that their process is somehow mystical or special. We've romanticized creativity to the point where we believe we're channeling something divine rather than recombining existing elements in new ways. And that's exactly what AI does as well. It recombines existing elements in new ways based on patterns that it has learned. The process is remarkably similar to human creativity, only faster and more systematic. So think about it this way. When a human artist creates a landscape, they're drawing on every mountain they've ever seen, every sunset they've ever seen, every piece of fantasy art they've ever seen. They combine these elements filtered through their technique and aesthetic preferences. And AI does essentially the same thing, just with access to vastly more source material and the ability to process it all at an incomprehensible speed. This becomes clearer when we look at writing and literature. Text generative AI works by analyzing vast amounts of written material and learning patterns, sentence structures, word relationships, narrative flows. Critics say it's not truly creating because it's just assembling pieces from things that it has read. But wait, isn't that exactly what human writers do? Because every author perfects their craft by reading voraciously. Stephen King famously said that if you want to be a writer, you have to do two things above all others: read a lot and write a lot. Why? Because reading is how we absorb the techniques, styles, and approaches of other writers. It's how we get better at being a writer. When I write, I'm drawing on every book I've ever read, every conversation I've had, every idea I've ever encountered, every experience that I've ever gone through. My original thoughts are really combinations and recombinations of existing concepts, filtered through my particular perspective and experience. Joseph Campbell spent his career demonstrating that human storytelling is incredibly derivative. His work on the monomyth, that's the hero's journey, showed that cultures around the world, with no contact with each other, developed remarkably similar story structures. We're not as original as we like to think we are. The only real difference between human creativity and AI creativity is that humans forget where their influences came from, while AI sources are much more traceable. Look at genre fiction, fantasy, science fiction, romance, mystery. These genres have established conventions, expected plot structures, and character archetypes. Writers work within these frameworks, adding their own variations and perspectives. That's not criticism, it's just how storytelling works. We tell the same basic stories over and over again, just with different characters and settings. An AI analyzing millions of romance novels will learn the same patterns a human writer learns by reading hundreds of them. The AI just learns faster and has access to more examples. And this brings us to the real issue here: human ego. We've constructed this mythology around creativity that positions human artists as uniquely gifted channels of original expression. But that's just self-serving nonsense. Artists throughout history have borrowed, adapted, and yes, sometimes outright copied from each other. The Renaissance masters worked in workshops where students learned by copying their teacher's work, stroke by stroke. And jazz musicians built their skills by learning to play exactly like their heroes before developing their own voice. And I can tell you, as a musician, the way that I learned to write songs and to structure songs and to channel what I wanted to convey into a song was by learning to play songs that I liked listening to. Shakespeare adapted most of his plots from existing sources. He took stories from ancient historians, contemporary playwrights, folk tales, myths, everywhere, and then reworked them with his particular genius for language and character. And was Shakespeare a thief? Or was he doing what all great artists do, which is taking existing materials and transforming them into something new? The uncomfortable truth is that purely original creation is a myth. Everything builds on everything else. Culture is cumulative. Art is iterative. Art is iterative. But humans have developed this ego investment in seeing themselves as special, as fundamentally different from machines. So when AI demonstrates that creativity might be more mechanical than mystical, it threatens our sense of uniqueness. We see this same ego protection in other areas. Chess masters initially dismissed computer chess as mere calculation, lacking the intuition and creativity of human play. Then computers started beating grandmasters consistently, and suddenly we decided that chess wasn't really about creativity after all. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where human ego becomes absolutely transparent. Humans continue to call the best human player the world champion, even though the best chess player in the world hasn't been a human in decades. The last I checked, the actual chess world champion is Stockfish, or whatever the current best chess engine is. And why don't humans recognize Stockfish as world champion? Simply put, ego. We're special. Chess engines aren't, and so they don't count. That's the belief. We've created a separate category, human world champion, specifically to preserve our sense of superiority in a domain where we've been thoroughly surpassed. And the same thing happened with Go, a game that was supposed to be too intuitive and creative for humans. And the same thing happened with Go, a game that was supposed to be too intuitive and creative for computers to master. Until AlphaGo didn't just beat the world champion, but played moves that human experts initially thought were mistakes, only to realize that those moves they thought were mistakes were actually brilliant innovations. And now we're seeing it with art and writing. As AI capabilities improve, we keep moving the goalposts of what constitutes real creativity. So let's get back to my earlier example about thumbnails versus logos because it perfectly illustrates what's actually happening in the creative market. When I need a thumbnail for each podcast episode, I'm looking for something that's visually appealing and that communicates the topic quickly and efficiently. And I need it fast, I need it cheap, and I need it to be good enough. AI delivers exactly that. I'm not looking for deep artistic meaning. I'm not looking for deep artistic meaning or brand strategy. I'm looking for functional visual content that fills a very specific role. But when I needed a logo, something that would represent my brand across all platforms, communicate my values, and work effectively in various contexts, I hired a human designer. Because that required understanding my audience, my message, my long-term vision. It needed strategic thinking beyond just visual execution. This is the natural market segmentation that's occurring, and it's not unique to creative work. We don't hand make every single screw and bolt when we manufacture them more efficiently. We reserve craftsmanship where things are handmade for where it adds genuine value. And there's another advantage to AI for commodity creative work that people don't talk about, the iteration problem. Here's the reality of working with human artists. If the art I get isn't what I want, there's only so many times I can ask them to redo it. I've got several things I've purchased via Fiverr that I'm never going to use because the artist fulfilled the request technically, but art is highly subjective and I just don't like the result. I still paid those guys, those girls, those artists, and I tipped them on all of these occasions because they did good work. They did what I asked them to do. But the reality is still that I got a product that I didn't want. When I ask for something like a hand brandishing a microphone like a weapon, that can be executed in an infinite number of ways. It isn't the artist's fault that the result I got wasn't what I had in mind. And after a few revisions, all you can really do with the human is count your losses and thank them for doing a good job, even if it isn't what you envisioned. There's a social and economic cost to endless iterations that don't exist with AI. And I'm sure it's my fault for not having a better description of what I want, but I'm not a visual person. I don't have a clear image in my head of what I want. I don't know what I want the final product to be. The best I can do is give general guidelines, and sometimes I can't even do that. Sometimes I just am like, look, this is my show. Based on what I've told you about my show, design a logo for it. With AI, I can iterate endlessly without guilt, without additional cost, without worrying about wasting someone's time or damaging a professional relationship. I can try dozens of variations until something clicks. And that's incredibly valuable for people like me who struggle to articulate visual concepts. And look, nothing I've said here is a criticism of human artists. They're not mind readers, and I don't expect them to be. Hence why I continue to pay them and continue to tip them, even if what they created wasn't really what I wanted. But it highlights another way that AI serves a different function in the creative ecosystem. It's not just about speed and cost. It's about the entire creative process and how different tools can serve different needs. And most of what AI is replacing was never high-value creative work anyway. It's commercial illustration for generic blog posts. It's stock photography of people pointing at laptops and smiling. It's content meal articles about 10 ways to improve your morning routine. Formulaic romance novels that follow the exact same plot structure as thousands of others. Were these really irreplaceable artistic expressions? Or were they commodity products dressed up with creative language? The artists that are creating truly innovative, emotionally resonant, culturally significant work are not being replaced by AI. If anything, AI might free them from having to do routine commercial work so that they can focus on more meaningful projects. So let's now address the elephant in the room, the economic impact on human creators. And this is where I'm going to say something that might be unpopular, but artists don't inherently deserve to make a living from their art any more than anyone else deserves to make a living from any particular skill. You make a living by providing value that other people are willing to pay for. If AI can create certain types of visual content faster and cheaper than human artists, then that's the market reality that humans need to grapple with. This isn't unique to art. Every technological advancement displaces some human workers. The printing press put scribes out of business. Photography revolutionized portrait painting. Digital photography nearly killed film photography. Each time, people in those industries had to adapt or had to find new ways to provide value. The difference is that we've romanticized artistic creation in a way that we don't romanticize other forms of work. When factory automation eliminated manufacturing jobs, we didn't argue that machines were stealing from assembly line workers. Actually, some people did incorrectly make that argument. They weren't the majority, but some people did make that argument. We recognized it, though, as technological progress with economic consequences, and we realized that those people were going to be able to find other jobs doing other things. But when AI creates art, suddenly we're talking about theft and the sanctity of human creativity. Why? Because we've convinced ourselves that art is somehow different, more sacred, more fundamentally human than other forms of work. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Nearly everyone is going to have to grapple with being replaced by AI eventually. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, even podcasters like myself. AI is getting better at writing, better at research, at analysis, at communication. There's no inherent reason why any particular field will be immune to this disruption. So the question isn't whether AI will displace human workers. It will. It's how quickly and how completely. And raging against AI theft isn't going to stop that process any more than the Luddites stopped industrialization by smashing textile machines. So what's the solution? Adaptation. Finding new ways to provide value that complement rather than compete with AI capabilities. Some artists are already doing this. They're using AI as a tool to enhance their creativity rather than replace it. They're focusing on aspects of art that remain uniquely human: personal connection, storytelling, interpretation, curation. Others are doubling down on what is handmade, the artisanal aspects of their work, marketing the human element as a premium feature. This is handmade. That's a legitimate strategy, but it's going to be a niche market. The reality is that most routine creative work it's going to be dominated by AI. That's not theft, it's efficiency. And here's what I find most interesting. Instead of focusing on adaptation, most of the creative community is spending energy on trying to stop AI development. They're pushing for regulations, copyright protections, licensing requirements. Essentially, they're trying to use government force to protect their economic interests. And that's understandable from a self-interest perspective, but it's also fundamentally immoral and anti-progress. It's using the coercive power of the state to prevent technological advancement that could benefit everyone just to preserve the economic position of a few particular people. The artists who will thrive are those who understand the distinction between commodity creative work and genuine artistic value. They'll use AI for the routine stuff and focus their human skills on work that requires deeper understanding, emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, other things that AI simply cannot imitate. And what we're really seeing is the democratization of creative tools. For the first time in history, someone with an idea but no artistic training can create visual art. They can write stories. They can compose music. Someone with no musical ability whatsoever, just an idea for a song, can compose music. That's not theft from professional artists. That's the expansion of human creative capacity. That's not theft from professional artists. That's the expansion of human creative capacity. Yes, it disrupts existing economic models, but disruption isn't inherently bad. The printing press disrupted the scribal tradition, but it gave us widespread literacy. Photography disrupted portrait painting, but gave us photojournalism and artistic photography. The internet disrupted traditional media, but gave us podcasts, blogs, and direct creator-to-audience relationships. And AI is following the same pattern. It's disrupting existing creative industries while creating new possibilities that we haven't even imagined yet. The sooner we get past our ego investment in human creative specialness, the sooner we can have productive discussions about how to build a future where both humans and AI can contribute to our cultural landscape. And that might mean rethinking how we value and compensate creative work. It might mean new models of collaboration between humans and AI. But it definitely means accepting that the old models are not coming back. And look, I understand the fear. Change is scary, especially when it threatens your livelihood. But the solution isn't to deny the legitimacy of AI creativity or to use government force to stop technological progress. The solution is to adapt, to find new ways to provide value, and to embrace the possibilities that AI opens up, rather than mourning the world that it's leaving behind. AI isn't stealing from human artists, not any more than human artists steal from each other. It's learning the same way that we all learned, by studying existing work and recombining elements in new ways. The real question isn't whether AI creativity is legitimate. It is. The question is, how do we adapt to a world where creativity is no longer a uniquely human domain? And how do we distinguish between commoditative creative work and genuine artistic value? I think my thumbnail versus logo example shows this distinction in action. The market is already making these decisions. The question is whether artists will adapt to these realities or continue fighting against the tide of technological progress. And the answer remains to be seen. And that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you so much for listening. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do all of those wonderful things. Help us get out there, help us reach more people. It's greatly appreciated. And join our Discord server because I've been deplatformed on Facebook and Reddit and a few other places for reasons that aren't entirely clear. Discord hasn't yet done it. Discord.ariademezzo.com to chat with me, hang out with us, and stay up to date on the latest things that we're doing. That's discord.ariademezzo.com. Hey, thank you so much for listening and have a beautiful day. Here's what artists don't want to admit. AI isn't replacing great art. It's replacing commercial illustrations, stock photography, content mill articles, formulaic fiction,